Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Recovery Podcast. Today I'll be talking to Andy Henderson as he shares his struggle with drugs, PTSD, and zero self-worth, and how one decision to do something different led him to a life he never thought possible through trusting in his higher power. Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Recovery Podcast. My name is Matt, and I'm excited to be sitting across from my guest today, Andy Henderson. Thank you for doing this, Andy. I really appreciate you, brother.
No place I'd rather be, Matt.
That's right. The best place to be on a Tuesday night.
Exactly.
Tonight.
Exactly. And I'm just humbled and honored to be with you tonight. I'm amazed by your recovery, and that's what keeps me coming back to this. You know, I know there's no place that I would rather be or that I need to be. And I know that it's a journey, not a destination.
That's right.
And I'm going to continue that journey to the best of my ability with God's help, with Jesus's help. And I know I need to continue to surrender to him every day. And he knows me. He knows that I fight him. He knows what I need to do before I even act. And he lets me know. And it's usually right when I don't want to, but right. I do it anyway.
Well, let me take care before we get. I know
Yeah.
With the relationship you and I have, this is going to be no problem kicking off this conversation, but I do have a few housekeeping things. First of all, the disclaimer that I always start with being that while we definitely do encourage everybody on the podcast to share from their experiences of their recovery programs, whether that be AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, etc. Nobody that is on this podcast, myself included, is a spokesperson of their recovery programs that they may choose to share their experiences from. That's because we can all go back out, we can all relapse, but that does not mean that the recovery programs don't work. It just means that we're human. So keep that in mind. The other thing that I realize that I need to start doing is that if you're listening to this podcast, I just want to encourage you to whatever platform you may be listening on, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, Amazon, Apple, I feel like I'm forgetting one. Spotify. There we go. Can't forget Spotify. Please subscribe. Hit that like button. If you can leave a rating on Spotify or Amazon or whatever. It's not for my ego. It's just it's just the way the digital world works, that the more engagement there is, the more, likes and subscriptions and what they call engagement, the more people it reaches. And so that's really what the goal about this is that I want to, however God wants to direct this, that it finds whoever needs to find. And so those small things help. So please, whatever platform you're on, if you can just like, subscribe, rate, if that's a part of the platform, please, I would really appreciate it. And that helps out the podcast a lot. So all of that out of the way. I've been excited all day. I say that about everybody that comes on, but it truly is an exciting experience for me because sitting across from these people, it's really, honestly, the only thing different than just sitting down with either an old friend, or sitting down with somebody that I know in talking recovery, kind of talking shop, if you will, is that it recharges me, man. The whole point of starting this podcast is I kind of got the idea from listening to people give their testimonies, sharing their stories at Celebrate Recovery. And those are always, for those of you who attend Celebrate Recovery, and I'm sure this applies to other recovery programs, it's almost always a consensus crowd favorite. We all love it because, one, you get to know somebody better that maybe you didn't know their story. And two, there's always something that reminds you of your own experience and something that helps you reflect or maybe see something in a different way. Or they have a point that maybe you hadn't thought about as it pertains to their recovery, but you can take and apply it to yours. And so I just get jazzed, man. It's just
it's a shot of hope.
Exactly
it really
what it
is. That's how this works. That's why it works. Well, it works because of God, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, and so you and I met at, did we meet at all right, I'm getting jumbled here. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but were you in the first step study I was in?
Yes.
Yes. You were in the one I got sober in, and then you joined my second one. It's my entire 2.5 years up to this point has been almost one entire step study.
That's good.
It's been great.
That's good.
It's exactly what I needed. But I forget, the lines between the two get so blurred, I can't remember Like sometimes I think like, okay, who was in that first one and who, not that it matters because for
Well,
me, it's been one experience, but
and the thing about recovery, it is a selfish program, but it's a
mhm,
paradox. It's to help ourself so that we can help others.
exactly.
And that feeling that you get, that you know shivers down your spine, and just a great feeling that
Mhm,
no one else can give us that feeling but the Lord. There's no
right,
one. There's no drug. There's nothing outside of ourselves can give us that feeling. And I experienced that very early on.
right. So what is your, if you just give us a kind of a brief overview of what you struggled with, the recovery programs you've been a part of, where you're at now, and just kind of give us a brief overview so we know a little bit about you, and then we'll kind of maybe from there we'll probably take a step back and maybe start back from the beginning. How's that sound?
Sure, sure. Well, I got clean 2008, May 9th, 2008. I was ready to die. I was ready to kill myself. And what did it was the opiates that I was prescribed. And I know a lot of people end up going back out on heroin and all that.
Mhm,
And he grabbed me, and I surrendered that night. I remember it very vividly, rolled up in a ball on my kitchen floor. I had just been arrested and fired the day before for theft of drugs. Excuse me. And he spoke to me, and I've never experienced that ever in my life. And I know it's because I wanted to die, but I didn't have the courage to kill myself. I didn't have the courage to do anything, but I was given a divine courage to go to that first NA meeting that I went
mhm,
to. And I wholeheartedly surrendered, and I experienced a spiritual awakening that I had never experienced in my life. And basically, I started, partying or drinking or whatever at 14, 15 years old, alcoholic mother, no guidance. I had some siblings, my brothers and we all just running the streets and craziness, quit school, I've had 4 DUIs, I've wrecked cars, I've been near death experiences one after another. And to bring me to the point of suicide was the defining end of my using, and I just knew it.
mhm,
And I had never really read the Bible much. I didn't know Jesus prior to CR. Really, I didn't know Jesus. I got clean in NA, and it was the greatest decision I ever made in my life because I made it for myself. It was something I did for me that I'd never done before.
mhm,
I knew my life was screwed up, one, relationship after another, geographic changes all over the country, the Virgin Islands, all over the place, to bring me to the point of, and this was part of his plan, I'm sure of it, to bring me to that point of suicide where I just no longer wanted to live. And later on, fast forward for 13, 14 years, well, 13 or so, when I found CR, or it found me, is when I really realized that he truly does have a plan for me.
mhm,
And part of that plan was getting clean in NA and helping other people, getting into service, and doing many different service opportunities that were right there in front of me. And I just wanted more and more and more.
mhm,
Um, but basically, when I got clean, I did exactly what they told me to do. They said go to a meeting every day, get a sponsor, get phone numbers and use them, get into service work, get a home group, get involved. And I just felt compelled to want to help these guys walking in the door for the first time, even though I only had a little clean time. I had, withdrawals for about a month after I stopped using. And within a week, I was just compelled to just help, help, help.
mhm,
I mean, I consumed my life with recovery, and it changed me. He changed me,
mhm,
and like I said, I didn't know Jesus then, nor did I read the Bible much, but somehow, well, I know it was his will. That radio station just got stuck on Caleb from the get-go. Still to this day, I don't listen to anything else anymore, and that helped change me. It also instilled in me that I'm worthy and that he does have a plan for me and that he truly loves me, or I would have died
Mhm.
the multiple times that I should have died. Um, and in the end, I welcomed it, but I was spiritually bankrupt in the end. And I didn't understand what that meant at the time until later on in NA, in my recovery. And it all made perfect sense. I had no emotion. I had no self-esteem, no love, no nothing. Spiritually, completely bankrupt. He changed me. I mean,
Mm.
within, like I said, within just a few days, I was changed person.
Let's before we go on a little bit, let's kind of because I want to go deeper into that. But for
Of
now,
course.
let's so you kind of touched on your childhood, and it sounded like you were kind of left to your own devices. There wasn't a lot of direct parental guidance or care in that
No.
sense. And uh did you say your mom struggled with
Alcohol.
alcoholism?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um
She actually died in 90 at 52 years old.
mm,
And she looked like she was 90. She
mm.
drank herself to death from, I think it was from the divorce from my father, I think, when I was just a baby. But I don't know where you want me to kind of start at, as far
No,
back as I can remember. But
um So was your father at all involved? I mean, I think hearing your
yeah,
story, I know he was around, but as far as when you were a kid, do you kind of spend time with him and kind of split
yeah,
time?
every 2 weeks, the four of us would be with him for the weekend,
Right.
and he lived probably 40, 50 minutes away or something like that.
Mm,
And a lot of times we would take a train. So this was in Connecticut where I actually grew up. I was born in Portland, Oregon, grew up in Connecticut till about 15, 17, then the Virgin Islands until I was 26, 27. But he didn't leave us. I mean, he wasn't a deadbeat dad, but he was consumed with his own addictions, which was money and women.
mm,
And, we found out more dark stuff about him later, but that's a whole nother story. But I craved him. I needed to be around my father. And it was awful. It was very, very difficult for me. I moved back and forth with him several times until I finally just stayed in the Virgin Islands, working for him. And we fought like cats and dogs and ended up, quitting working for him. And my disease was always with me. That dark cloud went wherever I went.
mm.
Down there is probably the worst place to be as an
Right.
addict.
Right.
There's a party every night of the week. It's summer all year long. And, I got into a lot of drinking, a lot of smoking pot, a lot of cocaine, a lot of crack. But I kept working. I always worked, which doesn't justify anything.
Mm,
I was just a lost soul. And my girlfriend, around when I was 16, she was my girlfriend for 3 years. She actually moved down the Virgin Islands with me. And after that, that was when my addiction really took off because she wanted to go back home to Connecticut to visit. Well, she ended up cheating on me, got pregnant, got hooked on cocaine. And when she told me she wasn't coming back, it destroyed me.
mm.
And from 19 for the rest of my life till 41 years old, I was just a lost soul. Any kind of drug, drinking, it wasn't every single day, but it was, in excess, way in excess.
So
But
so kind of going back to your mom
yeah.
and her alcoholism, as a kid when you're seeing this and you're um I mean, even back then, did you realize how much it was destroying your mother? Or was it just kind of this is the way it is? Kind
Yeah, we just kind of thought that's the way it was. I mean, at a very young age, I mean, I'll go to about the age of 7, 8 years old. We would all walk home from school. We went to a Catholic school, ironically enough. And upon getting home, pretty much every single day we'd come in, there'd be a cloud of cigarette smoke in the living room, and she's passed out. She would get up about 4:30 or so to make dinner for our stepfather, which he came along around that same time, and he was more of a security blanket for her. And But it was just like we didn't know any different. We just didn't know any different. We did whatever we wanted most of the time. Stole money from her all the time, go to the store, stole cigarettes from her. And, later on, things changed once the alcohol became a part of all of our lives, except for my sister. But earlier than that, at probably 5, 6 years old, we lived in a different location. Before she met my stepfather, we had a babysitter. And the babysitter she would bring her brother with her a lot of times. Well, I was sexually molested around 5 years old from him. And I didn't learn this until several years ago, that my sister was also molested by this guy. And we were young and dumb. We didn't know what was going on or anything, but I know that contributed to the way things played out in my life later on, especially with pornography and I had no self-esteem. So the only way to fill that void was alcohol. Well, first it was cigarettes, then alcohol, and then marijuana. And it worked for, that temporary amount of time until it didn't, So it, just like anything, it escalated more and more. And by the time I was 18, I had a really bad wreck. And at 4 a.m, on probably an 1/8 ounce of cocaine and a case of beer, I had just dropped my friend off and hit a pole doing 70, getting chased by the cops through a 25 zone. And he thought I was dead, but I walked out without a scratch. And that told me something then, but it didn't stop me. A year later, I got engaging pursuit again. This time I stopped, and I got arrested, went to jail. And when I got out, I moved back to the Virgin Islands, and I stayed there because that's what you do, And it came back to me, though, in 96 when I came here from the Virgin Islands. There was still a $2,000 fine, no license, still from, I don't know, several years prior to that. So that black cloud followed me everywhere I went. And the reason I left the Virgin Islands, where there was a lot of partying, a lot of drug use, my best friend was shot and killed right in front of me in my doorway and bled out in my arms. And as you can only imagine, the PTSD was instantaneous. My dad came and got me. I stayed at his house for a while, and I had already planned on leaving the Virgin Islands. I was going to go to LA to the College of Oceaneering and be a hard hat diver. That was already part of the plan prior to the murder. Well, it sped that up considerably. I sold all my stuff, packed my Jeep, put it on a shipping container, and shipped it to Miami. And left Miami to go to LA. I was going to drive there. I get to LA, and right off the bat, I'm hit with $1,700 in taxes because the Jeep had never been in America before. It was made in Canada. Go figure. But anyway, I made my way across the country, got to LA. The guy lied to me about a bunch of stuff, and I'm full-blown PTSD out of my mind. And he roomed me with this guy from Boston. We were going to go to the school together. Anyway, something hit me one night. We kind of got into it in the middle of a bad thunderstorm, packed my Jeep and drove. I'm going to go back to Oregon, where I'm from. Well, it's about 1,800 miles from where I was at. So I ran out of gas in Northern California. My brother wired me money, got me to Oregon, and stayed there for about 9-10 months. And the PTSD set in really, really bad. New people, new drugs, same problem. Got into meth, and of course the drinking was out of control, and the depression, and I can't even describe how bad it felt. I had survivor's guilt. I was contemplating going back down there and committing murder. But again, it was God, Jesus, and God that stepped in, that guided me to my phone, basically. And I called several places for help. They all wanted to charge me a lot of money, but I got a priest actually on the phone, and he talked to me for 2 hours and told me what I need to do. Said, you need to be with your family. So I called my brother, and he wired me money, and I took a Greyhound from Portland, Oregon to Cincinnati, Ohio in the winter. So I was on a bus for 3 days through the winter. And
Sure,
that
that
was
was fun.
interesting. I got here, and gosh, within 2 months, got another DUI. And that was my third. And let's see, I don't know, one much longer after that, I got another one. Ended up going to jail. Every time I had one, I got fired, of course. So my life was just a mess. And lo and behold, I met this girl in DUI class. And the broken person that I embraced her, even knowing she was an alcoholic. And we ended up getting married. And it was just a toxic relationship from day one.
I don't know if DUI class is the best dating service.
The worst. The worst. It was really crazy. But fast forward, I don't know, 10 years of that relationship, which was, I still worked and everything, and I avoided getting any more DUIs or anything, but still nothing really changed. But when that day came, that final straw, it was actually the second time I got fired from the same company. The first time I didn't get arrested. The same charge, theft of drugs, stealing pills in people's houses. As I'm a carpenter, I do remodeling and, whole houses, you name it, everything. But my first thought on every house I would go into back then was, where's the medicine cabinet? Where's the bathroom? I'd planned it out in my head, manipulated and lied and stole. But towards the end there, it quit working. Go figure. The drugs quit working. And it was awful. It was really bad. And then finally I got arrested and fired again. And it was a big deputy sheriff, Warren County deputy sheriff, probably about the size of Matt here. He was in that doorway, and he just take your tool belt off and turn around. And that day, it was like a huge weight lifted off of me. I had no fear. I just felt relief somehow, some way. And I was arrested in front of the whole family. The guy, the father and mother and their kids, and the worst part of it is this guy was a Mason fireman. He was a hero. Literally a hero. He was a first responder, a medic or EMT. And he actually went into one of the houses that I remodeled probably a year or two prior to that burned down in Mason, where this guy basically killed his family and then killed himself and lit the house on fire. And I knew these people. I met their kids when I was remodeling their house. And here I am a couple of years later stealing from this guy. So that was part of the reason I wanted to die, but mostly because that void was so big and dark that there was no escape. I just thought there was nothing I could do. There was no way out of this at all. And I was very scared. Never been that scared in my life. And my wife at the time, my ex-wife, she printed out the whole NA basic text off of AOL.com, if you know what that is. America
Shout out to the OG.
Way back when.
AOL.
And also a schedule of meetings, and that following day I had to go to court. And the following day, which was Saturday, I had a subscription or a prescription that was ready to pick up. And also I had that scheduled NA meeting schedule. And I scoped out, looked at the meetings I wanted to try to get to. But part of me drew me towards that pain clinic. And it was off Cincinnati Dayton Road. And I found myself driving off the exit towards that place. And I'm like, and I know this was a God moment, because I got off the exit, turned around, went to where I was going, to court, and got over with that. And the following day, like I said, I was just compelled to go to this meeting. I'd never been to AA, NA. I've never been to any recovery in my life, and it wasn't that I didn't didn't think I needed it. It was that, the old saying, I can handle it. But at this moment, the drugs that I was prescribed was for back surgery, and they were giving me 240 pills a month, and that wasn't enough. And I've been told this many times: one is too many, and 1,000's never enough, and it makes complete sense now. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I found myself in Norwood looking for this meeting, not drugs, looking for a meeting. I couldn't find it, but I saw there was a noon group meeting, and that was where I was supposed to be. I found the meeting, got there, and this guy sitting straight directly across from me, basically it was an inner city meeting, so me and him were the only two white people, which doesn't matter because I can identify with all these old crackheads and stuff. I mean, I was right where I was supposed to be. But once I introduced myself, they all got up, started hugging on me, telling me just keep coming back, and just giving me hope that I'd never felt in my life. But anyway, the guy sitting directly across from me, I got to know him, got his phone number, and he really helped me a lot. And 5 years later, he introduced me to my current wife, Monica, who is just a great Christian woman, never been in trouble, drink, smoke, none of that stuff. And I didn't know it at the time that God was working in my life like I'd never seen. I'd never experienced anything like this in my life. And that day I had a spiritual awakening. I had a feeling that I'd never experienced in my life. And I just started bawling. And that's when they all got up and started hugging on me. Sorry.
You're right.
I had no idea what was in store for me. All I knew is that I was broken, and if I didn't change or do something different, it was going to continue and it was going to kill me. There was no question in my mind about that. But given the fact that they all got up, hugging on me, loving on me, that changed me that day. And
this is the first meeting. Are you talking about the first
very
meeting?
First meeting I went to, yes. And I just didn't feel any fear at all. I just felt like I knew I was right where I was supposed to be. And I didn't know what was coming. All I knew is that I was really sick. The withdrawals were the worst feeling I've ever felt in my life. But on top of that, the spiritual awakening that I had basically combated that feeling of sickness and withdrawal from the drugs and gave me a hope that I'd never experienced in my life. And everything behind me no longer mattered.
Well, there's something to be said, right? Like something that you said stuck out with me, and that is I knew where I needed to be. And I think that's an experience that a lot of us have in recovery where when you're using, you never have that feeling. You never have that sense that you're where you need to be.
No.
And because for a lot of us, what happens is and I forget who I interviewed that described it this way. The first time I used opiates specifically was like, that was like a spiritual awakening in a very perverted sense. Like for me, that was when I was like, oh, I like this. Like this is where I'm supposed to be in my mind.
Sure.
Right. This fills that void. Now, what I didn't know is that it expands that void exponentially. The more you use, the bigger that void gets. To the point that at one point, like where you said the drugs stopped working, and I don't think it's a stretch by assuming it's the same experience I had, which was, I've used all I can use. There is, like you said, 1,000's not enough. One is too many, 1,000's not enough. You hit that point where you realize there's no there's no getting that original feeling back.
No.
There's no, they call it chasing the dragon, right? Like,
Right. There's a lot of little sayings, but it's the same thing.
yeah, because you're chasing that initial feeling for your entire time using, and you never get it again.
Right.
Not in the same way. And eventually it stops being about you medicating yourself to feel better, and it starts becoming a job. And it's like, it becomes a vocation in a sense.
Right.
Where like, this is no longer about me doing something that makes me feel good. This is about me doing this because I can't stop.
Right. And it's just consuming. It's all you want. It's all you can think about. And you can have a big handful of drugs and still be wondering where's the next one coming from.
Yeah.
And the biggest problem with addiction is that we lose the ability to love. We
Yeah.
lose the ability to have compassion or any emotion for that matter. And that is the worst part of it. But when I first got clean, I mean, really embracing recovery, I started getting emotions that I'd never experienced before. And I know that was part of God's plan to turn me back into the person I was supposed to be.
Well, let's talk about that real quick,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Of course.
Because you talked about your PTSD and the things that you would experience with your best friend dying. I mean, that's as far as traumatic experiences go, that's up there. That's massive. That is not something that anybody should have to go through. And so, I'm assuming part of your drug use was running from that PTSD, trying to self-medicate your way through that, in a sense. Maybe if you didn't realize it, would you feel like that was, you were in pain? Is generally what I'm saying.
And you want to run away from it, but you can't. There's
Right.
no escaping it, no matter where you go or who you're with. That dark cloud and the void, the empty void within us is always there.
Right.
And I now know that the only way to fill that is with Jesus. I mean, there's no question in my mind about that today, even though I still try to fight it.
Yeah.
So,
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Because I want to get to I want to get to the Jesus part in a minute.
Sure.
Because I feel like that deserves all the time we can give it. But to kind of go back to, you start experiencing feelings again. That's something that I experienced, right? Like it's. I remember the first time I felt joy. I remember the first time I felt genuine like pain. Like it wasn't this numbed kind of, I know it's there, but it's not really. It's just an annoyance. Now, I remember. But as you start to feel things, your emotions begin to reset. The kind of the callousness and the mute button that you've placed in your brain and on a physiological side, but also in your heart, emotionally and spiritually. Did you have to start process? Were you basically? Did you have to look your PTSD in the eye at that point? Was there a point that you're like, I need to address this. I can't run from this anymore.
Oh yeah. I had to come to terms with what happened and know in my heart that it had nothing to do with me. It was not my fault. I wasn't supposed to be dead that day, and it's really just the strangest feeling to have survivor's guilt. It really is just the oddest feeling ever. And, I was running from myself up to that point and obviously continued running after that happened too. But basically, I didn't come to terms completely to it until I started working the 12 steps. Step 4 to be specific.
You mean, was that in Celebrate Recovery? Was that
in NA? Yeah, in NA. And, I laid it all out, in step 4, the first time I did step 4, and that was right at the top of the list. And, the problem with what I witnessed is it's still just as clear and vivid right now today as it was when it happened, but it gave me a whole new perspective when I got clean that I'm supposed to help people. For me, the meaning of life is to help people. Of course, I finally made it here to the village, and yeah, love others, love your neighbor, love God, and make disciples, and all that makes sense to me now, and for the longest time it really didn't, because NA is, considerably different than CR and AA, but it is very in depth. I mean, it digs very deep with the questions and the program itself. But the more I helped people, the more it filled the void. That feeling that I would get going to a meeting is indescribable. I think you know that feeling. I mean, it just recharges you and makes you feel better about everything.
It has this way of making your problems feel a lot smaller when you walk out.
Right. Oh, definitely. And that's the thing about meetings, is you can bring those problems to the meeting and dump them.
That's right.
And that's what they're designed for. Unfortunately, a lot of people hold it in and continue. They're just not ready to surrender, and I was told early on that when the pain gets great enough, we become willing to change, and meaning change is surrender. And that's exactly what happened to me. And I just knew that I was at the end. I just knew it. And I welcomed death. I really did. But all I could do was roll up in a ball and cry. And that was actually prior to the meetings. A couple days prior to them is when I had a huge jolt of emotion. And I mean, I just bawled for a couple hours, that I'd never done that in my life, ever. And growing up, though, I never had self-esteem. I was a hypochondriac. I always craved attention, and then, I mean, I couldn't approach girls. I mean, it was just a self-esteem issue. I had none. But going into recovery, I finally found something in my life that made me feel better about myself. And it was something I did for myself. And it's a paradox. Recovery is a paradox, because you have to be selfish. You have to do it for yourself in order to help other people, and that keep what you have by giving it away is exactly what happens in recovery, But the key to recovery is acceptance and surrender. Acceptance, I had to accept my life up to that point. That, here I am, I'm still alive. There's things I know how to do really well. I learned a lot of things along the way. I was a dope fiend, thief, liar, but it was because of the drugs, because of what I was putting into my body made me that way. I didn't wake up one day, ask to be that way. That's just who I was. And I was hidden, though. I was hidden from myself. I was hidden from the world until Jesus stepped into my life and changed me in ways that I never thought possible. I never thought I could feel good about myself, good about anything for that matter. But it happened. And it was because of that surrender that I didn't even know I was doing that at the time.
Right.
But I started sharing in that meeting, that very first meeting, and that's when the change happened, and I know that He, meaning God, guided me to that meeting that day. I mean, literally to the doorstep of this place, an old church. It was a building off of the old church, right off of, I forget what road, right off Norwood Lateral there in Norwood. And I could identify with these people, and once I saw the amount of recovery in that room, that very first meeting, there was over 400 years of recovery with only 20 people maybe. And, the old saying, if you can do it, I can do it, you know? And I share the same thing. If I can do this, given what I'd been through, anybody can do it. And, but I came to terms with, the PTSD, what had happened, and all the other wreckage and heartache and damage in my life. My mother, my father, I mean, everything. Good friends that had died behind the wheel from alcohol, and there's been quite a few of them. To know today that I was spared because of the plan that he has for me, and I know that to be true today. And my part is to continue to surrender and to continue to do kind of like what you had shared about not too long ago is what he's telling me to do, but I fight it. I do. I mean, I'm being honest today. I do fight it a lot. And I can't continue to be selfish about my life today. There was a lot of change after COVID. That NA meetings kind of broke up. Everything was Zoom meetings. I get nothing from Zoom meetings. And, I had a falling out with a guy that was in one of my home groups up in Landon. And, I just kind of veered away from it because there was still a lot of darkness in the meetings that people would bring in. And lo and behold, our pastor down at down at the Vineyard down in Tri-County, he had left the church or whatever. So we're like, we need to find a new church. We drive around little bitty South Lebanon here. We're like, wait, what's that place? That little village church. So we started coming here when it was still in the little room down the hall. And for whatever reason, I was driving through right by the church here. Obviously, it was a Wednesday because I saw the CR flag. And I'm like, what is that? I never heard of it before. So I inquired. I think it was either Randy or Carol that I'd talked to about it, and came to that first CR meeting. And I was blown away. I was literally blown away when I realized and internalized what the steps truly are and truly where they're from. I didn't know most of it's from Jesus's mouth. I mean, I didn't know that before. Now, a guy, when I had about 2 years clean, I had my NA basic text in front of me, and he comes up to me and he says, "You know where all that's from, don't you?" I'm like, "I don't know. These dudes came up with it in a basement in the 50s or something." He said, "No." I said, "No, this is from the Bible." And that's when it dawned on me, and it made so much sense why it works so good. And all we have to do is our part is surrender and do what he tells us to do, which is difficult for addicts. It's very difficult. But for me, I knew that, I had enough pain in my life, pain and heartache, one after another, over and over and over, for up until I was 41 years old. And at that point in time, I was already working the steps, had a sponsor, going to meetings every day, and getting into all kinds of service, going to rehabs and jails, and, opening meetings and chairing meetings. And, and I was going every single day. I would go from work to the meetings, and I picked up the nickname Dirty Andy, because I would come in there just filthy from work. It didn't matter, because I knew that was the only thing that made me feel that way, that good. Mm-hmm. Nothing ever did. There's no drug. There's nothing outside of myself could ever make me feel that way. And, and I was told this early on from other old timers that, it's an inside job. There's nothing outside of you that can change you. Only Jesus in my heart can change me, and today I am just extremely grateful that he is with us and he exists and he wants the best for us. Who does that? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It just, nothing compares to him. Nothing compares to the words he spoke, what he has done, the miracles he's performed in myself, including. And I heard him, the first week I was clean. I guess I had 6-7 days clean, still really dope sick. I actually got my old job back that I didn't burn a bridge at. And of course they wanted me to start right away. And I told them, well, I had to lie because I was too sick to go. But anyway, that first job they threw me on by myself is in a house down at the end of Delta, overlooking the river. Beautiful place. Of course, it's May. It's getting towards the end of May, and I go in this house, and I'm still really dope sick, mind you, and he gave me several jobs to do, and this was a huge remodel and addition and blah blah blah. But anyway, the guy's wife is a cancer patient, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds of pills in that house. Unfilled prescriptions, unopened bottles of the same drugs I was using. And anyway, I was up in a bathroom in that same house cutting an access panel for some plumbing or something. And I turn around, and there's a bottle of pills right on the edge of the vanity, facing out. I could see exactly what it was, and it was full because she hated taking them. And that's when he spoke to me right then and there. And I just started basically cussing and laughing at the devil that was telling me, just go ahead, nobody will know, but anyway, God told me to get up, go out on the deck, look at the river, and just embrace the beauty of the river. And, right then and there, I completely lost the desire to use whatsoever. And I was dope sick as can be. My body needed it, but my heart, my mind, I was done. I'd surrendered. I was done. There's no way I'm doing this. And no one else was home in the house. And I'm just going on and on, telling the devil to go screw himself. And I mean, loud. I was being loud, but in a good way. You know what I mean? It was so hard to describe. I wish I had a film of myself doing this, but I remember it very vividly, which I don't remember a lot of my early recovery because of the, being in withdrawals and stuff. But I remember that very vividly. And he basically told me everything's going to be all right. Just let me in, basically. And at the time, I didn't know him. I really didn't know God. I knew up to that point that he had saved me many times. So many near-death experiences. I mean, I can't even remember how many. Because of the plan he has for me. And his plan, I know, has a lot to do with this very moment being here with you, Matt. And I love you, brother. And there's nothing else in my life that can make me feel what I'm feeling right now but him. I want to weep, but I want to, embrace him because he deems me worthy when I was a worthless piece of crap my whole life. I didn't know. I just didn't know that life can be how it is today. What he's given me today. I had no clue. Not in a million years you could tell me that my life would be what it is right now. There's no way. But even still, even with that being said, I still want to take my will back. I still have crazy thoughts. I don't have using dreams anymore or anything like that, nor do I want to use, but still I'm broken, just like he knows we're all broken. And I'm okay with that today. I'm okay with being broken, but I know that I need to work on doing what he's telling me to do. And part of it is being here right now, because honestly, at the end of the day, I was tired a lot of today and haven't been feeling great lately. I didn't want to come. And I'm like, what? You know what I mean? No. And he just guides me. I don't know how to describe it. Even coming to meetings now, it's, a lot of times I don't want to go. That's my will. I know what my will looks like. My will is exactly the opposite of his will for me to this day still. And I know that will always be that way. But as long as I continue to embrace him and stay in contact with him and read his word every day, I do that every single day. And that's what keeps me on track, in my life. And Lately, I mean, I had a big life change. I let go of my business because physically I couldn't keep doing it, and embraced this new job with a client of mine that I had. And it's a good job, but yet it's like, no, I deserve more, or I should be doing this and I should be making more. And you know what I mean? And at the end of the day, I'm like, what is wrong with you? And the most important thing in my life today is the life I have because of my recovery. And oh, it's just can be very confusing. Because I'm with a woman now that I didn't even know existed. I'd never been with a woman that never been in trouble or partied or drank or smoked or blah blah blah. I mean, she's never even had a parking ticket, and our divorces were finalized the same exact week in April. It was like April 17th or something like that, 2012. And who can make that happen? Nobody can make that happen. Only God. She didn't know me. I didn't know her. That guy that I met in that very first meeting that sat directly across from me introduced me to her. And we started dating, and we just clicked, right away. And I know I prayed for someone like her to come into my life. And prior to recovery or prior to surrendering, I'd never really prayed. I'd never asked God for anything, I don't think, really, other than save me. In the end, I begged him to save me, and he did.
Right.
And I know that he's listening, and I know that he hears us, and I know that he does what he says he's going to do if we embrace him, and and I feel bad for people that just can't seem to do that part of it. And I know that my role in recovery is to at least give that shot of hope, that some of my experience that they can relate to, and recovery. Gosh, there's so much to it for me, but I mean, the most important thing in my life is doing the next right thing in front of me in this moment. And he is the only reason I was able to get rid of the committee in my head. I've lost many nights of sleep by the committee. Just, it wouldn't shut up. The past, the future, just whatever. I mean, just would not stop. And the Prince of Peace, wow, he has given me a peace that I never knew existed. I never knew that it existed. And I've lived through enough recovery to know what complacency looks like, to know what laziness looks like, to know what taking my will back looks like. And I all I have to do is think back 20 years, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm not going back there. And he doesn't want me to go back there. He wants me to stay in the moment and continue to go forward and love myself, and embrace myself. And only then am I able to share that with other people, that love, that self-love, and that self-compassion and respect, and just taking care of myself. And I'm all about that today, because I just didn't care about myself, and
Well, it's that was a lot. Good stuff. But kind of what you just touched on, I wanted to go in a little bit deep. I try with everybody that's on. They tend to make a point that I think is important to kind of expand upon, and I want to talk about that.
Sure.
Because you mentioned that because of a lot of things in your past, because of what happened with your best friend, because of how the sexual trauma you experienced as a child and being molested, your self-esteem took some massive hits. To the point it was pretty non-existent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's something that we experience in recovery, where at some point, a lot of us come in, and even if we, on the outside, because I've seen people come in kind of both ways. People come in and they're like, I am a complete, I'm just going to use my colorful language that I like to use, but like, so bear with me and give me a little bit of slack here. But a lot of people come in and they either like, I'm not going to give up my life because I know what I'm doing. I'm miserable. I'm just here because I'm looking for something else to do. I need something else to help me get me better. So you've got that kind of person. And then the other side of it, you see the complete opposite is I'm a complete piece of shit beyond saving. What Mitch, my sponsor, Mitch Spees, calls terminally unique. And
Yeah.
I'm terminally unique. I am such a special niche brand of messed up that God can't save me, or
Right.
no prayer program can help me. There's no 12 steps can help me. I see what happened. This might have worked for other people, but it's not going to work for me. What's funny is both those people wind up. I'm like, you look at it and you're like, you're both in a recovery meeting right now.
Yeah.
So clearly there's something. What you're saying and what brought you here don't line up. What you're telling yourself and other people and what's drew you here do not constitute of the same truths.
Right. Exactly.
No matter, and so one of them has to be misled. So for me, I was a little bit of both. I was definitely considered myself terminally unique when I started, and was like, despite the many people that I've seen, guys like Paul and Daryl and some other people that I'll have on later, where I was like, I wanted. A big part of me wanted to write recovery off, and specifically celebrate recovery because that's what I had been exposed to.
Right.
I couldn't, because I'm like, in my darkest days, I sat down and I said I need to figure out whether or not I can write off this recovery thing. And then I looked at the people that had been changed, and I'm like, they didn't do that themselves. So if I'm going to write off recovery, I have to write off God. And I tried, and I couldn't. I realized, even as messed up as I was, as deluded as I was as a person, I realized that I could not get past the fact that I believed that there was a higher power, and I believed that the higher power is Jesus Christ. I just didn't want to trust him, and so all of that to get back to the point of we come in, we're in pain. When we start to get sober, we're, as Daryl Wilson says, nobody got here on a winning streak.
Right.
We're all messed up when we come in. Self-esteem's low. At some point, as we start to work on ourselves, we have to come to one of the biggest challenges in the early days is coming to terms with the fact that we have to forgive ourselves. And as you start that process, you realize, especially in Celebrate Recovery, which is Christ-centered, which has scriptures, which has scripturally based, and there are scriptures in there that you can't discount, where if you're going to follow Jesus Christ specifically as your higher power, and you're going to forgive yourself, why do you forgive yourself? Well, because you're commanded to. Because Christ has forgiven you.
Right.
And if he forgives you, you can't hold that against you. You just can't. Those two things can't coexist. You can't hold on to the thing. You can't hold on to your resentments toward yourself and accept the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. And the reason why you are co-heirs with Christ, right? The Bible talks about that Jesus has called you back in. He's made the way for you to come back into the fold of God. And if the things you've done have been forgiven, you can't hold those things against yourself anymore. And you also can't hold those things against other people. It is the cure-all for resentment. And part of that is that you inadvertently, whether you intend to or not, pick up some self-esteem. So for you, as you start your recovery process, and you didn't believe when you started, you didn't have a relationship with God when you started recovery, correct?
No, I mean, I always believed in God, I grew up Roman Catholic, quote unquote, till, I don't know, 5th grade, 6th grade, something like that. But no real conversation with him, never really read the Bible, never really prayed, but regardless of that, he was there.
Sure.
I mean, he was always there for us, and I say us because my siblings and I were in on this together.
Right.
And, and it's funny you bring up the forgiveness part, because that tangible evidence I have today of when I forgave myself was a direct result of working the 12 steps.
Mm-hmm.
but I felt it. I just completely felt it, and all the resentment was gone, all of the past wreckage. And it wasn't because I knew I was forgiven by Jesus. It wasn't because of that. It was because he knew, I know that he knew that I didn't have that relationship with him that was going to come eventually, but when my ex-wife went out on me, I had like, what I have, about 2.5, 3 years clean. And, she cheated on me and, went out, started using all these drugs, spent all her money. It was devastating. But when that happened, I did the only thing I knew to do was to go to meetings every day. And probably about 8 months or so into that, I forgave her. I forgave her, and I just felt it. I mean, it just was no longer a burden of mine. It was no longer something I could control. I had to accept that she's an addict too. I can't blame her for that, because she's actually was a really good person, despite the alcoholism and then the drug use, and the only reason I was able to forgive her is because I truly forgave myself for all the past wreckage of my past. And I knew it was a direct result. Every single one of them that I could think of was because of using against my will. I was using against my will, basically. Maybe a few times I told myself I'm not going to, use or do this or do that. And 10 minutes later, you're doing it. Hiding drugs from yourself, hiding money from, it's just insane. The disease of addiction is cunning, baffling, insidious, completely the description of Satan. And it's exactly what it is. And once I started feeling a little bit better physically and emotionally, that's when things started to come into perspective. I started getting emotions and feelings, and one of which was that self-forgiveness, looking at my life as a whole, and where I had really, to me, I never accomplished anything. I never I never did anything good. I was just beating up on myself all the time. But in reality, that wasn't true. I was lying to myself, because I had done good. I had helped people. I had done a lot of good in my life. But it was like every time that I would screw up because of using, whatever that screw up was, kind of X'd out all the good stuff in my head, which was also a lie in my head, which I know is the devil telling me these things, lying to me about everything. But when I was able to forgive her, that was another huge weight that was lifted off of me that was not my burden to bear, and it's like for whatever reason, being human, we want to bear these burdens. Like, we just hold on to them for dear life, and it's even in our basic NA textbook where, oblivion is preferable to anything else, just solitude and isolation and, me and the dope or whatever, just leave me alone, and, after getting clean for some time, I wanted nothing more to be out there and be sharing the message to people. And, I wish I could just grab everyone that's an addict and suffering, bring them in and cure them. You know what I mean? I know that's not possible, but I was just compelled to help others like never before, ever. And, I was always this helpful, considerate person to people. But then on the dark side, I can be stealing your drugs or lying to you about whatever. And you know what I mean? And, but that surrender that happened early on is what led to that self-forgiveness and other self things. And that goes right back to the paradox of recovery, because it's a selfish program. It needs to be a selfish program in order to be selfless. And that's exactly what happened. And I hate seeing, I don't want to use that word. I really don't like, seeing people that just can't seem to surrender. It's like, how much pain do you need to go through? And then I have to look at my story, look at myself in the end, the pain I was going through. I mean, I was ready to kill myself, and that's, I guess, the brink that we need to be brought to in order to change. Like I said, when the pain gets great enough, we become willing to change. Mm-hmm. And it was that willingness. I had the willingness to do something different, to break the chain of addiction, to break that cycle of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, because I've done it hundreds and hundreds of times. And for the first time in my life, I finally did something different, and it changed me almost immediately. Within the first week of recovery, I was a different person. And I hadn't forgiven myself yet, and I hadn't, had any much self-esteem or self-awareness or anything like that. All I knew is that something just changed in me because I don't want to use anymore. And that's never been my story in my entire life.
Right.
And, coming to CR is when it really put all these things into perspective, because NA is designed for everyone. Believer, non-believer, it doesn't matter. Anybody off the street, which that's what I love about NA. Mm. Everyone is welcome, whether you believe anything or not. It doesn't matter. Right. Your higher power can be the doorknob or the table. It doesn't matter. For me, it's always been God. Now I know, that my direct connection to God is Jesus. And without Jesus, there is no connection to God. Mm. And I'm going through the Gospels again, reading them again. I just started over in Matthew again, and I'm on chapter 10. And I can, just put it on play, because you can do that with technology, like you were saying. And I can literally imagine myself sitting with the crowd listening to him. And the amount of millions and millions of people since him, billions maybe, you can't go wrong. I mean, you just can't go wrong with this, and I'm just so extremely grateful for him, and I'd like to think that he'd come back in our lifetime, but it doesn't matter, because his words are there. He is always there, regardless of that. And to be with the woman I'm with now is a Christian. I mean, she's been following Jesus her whole life, and I embrace her for that, but I'm working on myself in that regard too, of building that relationship with him more and more, because my will continues to get in the way. Not that like I don't need it or whatever. It's like, I like to do things my way. I don't want to do anything sometimes. But he's calling me. He called me to this church. He called me into that step study. Just immediately I just said, yeah, I'll join it, because you can't work the steps enough. Mm-hmm. And I've heard this shared many, many times, and I will many, many more. It's about a journey, not a destination. It's not something that's ever going to go away, but I can't look at it like, oh man, the rest of my life, I got to do it. No, it's today. It's how I feel today, right now, because clean time doesn't equal recovery. Recovery equals recovery. Mm-hmm. And I learned very early on that I had to thoroughly work the steps and thoroughly apply them to my life. And if I don't, nothing's going to change. Well, I was so desperate, because that gift of desperation is what got me in that door. And I embraced what they were telling me, because I could identify with the stories I was hearing. They were my own stories from strangers. Mm-hmm. Because like you said, we come in here thinking we're unique and that nobody can fix me, nobody can help me. And I'm right. Nobody can, except the Lord, except divine intervention. And I have experienced that. I have tangible, hard evidence of that divine intervention in my life. And, I wish I could make everybody hear it and experience it, but everyone has their own journey. Everyone has their own pains and issues they need to get through and let go of. And I know the hardest thing for us to do is forgive ourselves. Guilt is something that can be all consuming and take us to death. And I've experienced it. I've been to many funerals, and pretty much the majority of them are that same exact reason. The guilt consumed them, and the only thing that would relieve it for a bit or a minute is using. The last one I experienced was a good friend of mine. He was a painter. He's actually the one I learned everything I know about painting. Great guy, super nice guy. And he had a couple years clean from heroin. Well, one day nobody heard from him. He's working for his dad. He had the paint truck, the work van and everything. Well, they found him dead in Avondale with a needle in his arm. And it was just devastating, and that was the last funeral out of probably 40 that I'd been to since I'd been clean. And I'm just like, I don't want to see him like that anymore. I'm not going to go to any more funerals. I don't want to see that person for the last time in a box, and it strengthened my recovery, my resolve for recovery. It just strengthened it, because I don't want to be that person. I don't want to set that kind of an example. I don't want to destroy my family members, and that's the same thing with suicide. I'm so grateful that he pulled me out of that dark hole of suicide, that I didn't have to inflict that pain on my family, because since I've been clean, my family has embraced me. I helped my younger brother. He's clean now, and actually went through the 12 steps, the NA 12 steps with him. And I told him about CR, and now he's a huge part of CR in Florence, which he never in a million years thought that he would be doing something like that. And it's just such an amazing process, and a miraculous experience to watch others embrace this, get clean, change, and you see it in front of your very eyes. I can't deny it. Even though my own will wants to go the other way sometimes, even now, even still, I'm not saying this very moment, but, the disease never goes away of addiction, but that the darkness and the pain does. The OCD, if you will, obsessive compulsive disorder, blah, 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 it manifests in other areas of our life, but the 12 steps and what Jesus is telling us combats all of that, and even my first sponsor told me, because I had an issue with pornography because of the sexual abuse, I guess, I don't know, was exposed to porno very early, 7 years old, maybe something like that. And it does a lot of damage. And he just was like, all right, well, when you go through the steps again, instead of drugs, apply it to the pornography, apply it to whatever you're going through. Doesn't matter what it is, because the 12 steps are universal in every issue out there, whether it's gambling or guns or sex or overeating. They're all the same 12 steps, and the more that was put into perspective in my life, the more I knew I had nothing to worry about or fear. Just like he tells us in the Bible, don't fear anything. And the part where he tells us that everything will be provided for us, what we eat, what we wear, where we're going to live, what we're going to do. I mean, I lived through that the first, 2 years of my recovery. I'll never forget. I had moved 4 times after I kicked my wife out of her own house. I ended up moving 4 times that year. And I think it was the 3rd time that I moved. I was in this house I rented in Woodlawn. He was actually one of my clients too. I rented a house from him. I'm sitting in the basement. It's a finished basement. Got a fire going. By myself, no money, no nothing. It's like January or December 20th or something like that. And I'm like, I just sat there. I didn't react. I didn't do anything stupid. Though I did not have a relationship with Jesus yet, he literally provided for me, because I had no idea what I was going to do. how I was going to pay the upcoming bills, the rent, blah, 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 whatever. And all of a sudden I get a call from a neighbor of one of my other clients, and I started a job. So I worked for myself at the time, and right off the bat, get a check, everything's paid. I mean, he took care of everything, literally. Since I've been clean, he has taken care of me. I've never been without. I've never had to struggle. Even in my head, I did. In my head, of course, because, we just think what we have isn't enough. And it's because of the drug use, because one's too many, a thousand's never enough. It applies to a lot of things, a lot of different stuff. And now I know, and I wasn't supposed to know this until now. And I mean the last several years, is that he's got me. He takes care of everything. All I got to do is what's right in front of me, the next right thing in front of me. God's will for me is to do the next right thing in front of me. And I know what it is. Do I always want to do it? No, of course not. My will is like, no, I'm not. And I've done that. Excuse me. And I know we all have. He's telling me to go this way and I go the other way. And I don't usually wonder why I feel like crap about whatever, but when I follow God's will for my life, things get better, just like he said it would. And I can't argue it, but it's being a broken human. That's just what we do, making a mountain out of a little tiny molehill, little bitty one. I'll make a freaking giant mountain out of it. And I haven't experienced that in a while, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't know what he has in store for me. So I continue to stay in the moment, in this reality. And it's not always easy. I know that, but I no longer project, I no longer dwell on the past, all the wreckage and everything, and it's due to the fact that I know today that I'm forgiven. I know that today. I feel it today. Not that I take advantage of it. Well, I'm going to go do this because I know you're going to forgive me tomorrow, so I'm going to do, no. I know it doesn't work that way. And it's not like I'm missing out on anything. I'm not missing out on fun or any of this other stuff. And it always brings up this one country song, I'm not much fun since I quit drinking. You know what I mean? And that's just so silly to me because I need to learn who I'm supposed to be clean, who I'm supposed to be with a clear head and without, any dependence on anything.
Well, when I got sober, sorry, 1 second.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, the thought jumped. I had two things going on. I had a bottle of water in my hand, and then a thought jumped in my head at the same time. I realized after I got sober and I started to actually be me again, or probably honestly be me for the first time.
Right.
That part of that gaining your self-esteem back, and the kind of self-esteem that is built through Christ is not it's the kind that's the foundation is humility, because you understand where it comes from and it's not you. And for me, I realized that God makes life pretty unfair, because I did not get the things that I deserved. I did not suffer the consequences I could have. I should have died, and I
Right.
didn't. And instead, I still have my marriage. I still have my family intact. Nothing was lost that God hasn't redeemed and brought back. And I realized that once I got sober, that I had something to offer. Not like I wasn't just a screw up. I wasn't just a drug addict. I wasn't just a sum of all my faults and character defects.
Right.
That I had something. I had something to offer the world, that I could be a net positive to the people around me. And it's not because I'm special. It's not because it's not because there's something about me that's so awesome that I should share it with everybody, because it would be negligent of me to not let the world experience all of Matt. It's that God has built certain things into me that are from him, that if I'm not sober and I'm not clean and I'm not in a good place, I can't be the person that I'm supposed to be to the people around me.
Right.
And I think every one of us has that thing to offer. And so, like for you, for instance, the one thing that nobody can ever say that you are lacking in is enthusiasm. You have this enthusiasm that's infectious, that gets people thinking about recovery and engaging in recovery in a way that is an all-in proposition. And it's something that's important because not everybody has that infectious enthusiasm that you have. For me, I it took me a while to engage in it, but there's certain things that I enjoy doing. Like I have a creative drive to me that enabled me to do this podcast.
Oh,
for
there's no
instance.
question about it. You definitely have gifts that when I first met you, I saw those in you. You didn't see them yet. And to watch you grow in your recovery has been just an amazing thing for me to experience. And it's we can't experience it ourselves because it kind of goes at a snail's pace.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing it from the outside, like for me, seeing you and Kyle together, it just blows me away, man. And that is why recovery is so important to me. And I know I have to be here to
Right.
not just experience that, but to share things that you all can identify with, not just the pain and heartache, but the surrender, the goodness
Right.
that happens. And
It's important. The point being, what I was saying before, is that you don't understand. Like when you're in the pit, and you're really, really, honestly, just a slave to whatever it is that brought you in, whatever dysfunction, whatever addiction, codependency, grief, whatever it is that's got you in chains. What you don't realize is the impact that you have on the people around you when you finally do surrender, like you talked about. And the whatever I have, or whatever you have, or whatever anybody else on the podcast, or anybody else in recovery, or in the world, or in your workplace, or in your church, what they don't, you have something to offer. It's not like the promise of recovery is not just that you're going to get clean. It's that you're going to learn to live life. And a part of learning to live life is that at some point, if you want to keep progressing and becoming the person that you're supposed to be, you have to find you're going to discover along the way a way that you can be useful to somebody else. You can impact somebody else for the greater good. There's a reason why we call recovery programs fellowships. It's because the fellowship is important. You can't, I need you as much as you need me. We need each other collectively, because individually we're going to be in a deficit in some way, right? But together we can cover a lot of the needs, right?
Right.
If not through Jesus Christ and or a higher power in general, but speaking specifically in you and I's experience, it's Jesus
Right.
Christ. And what I realized is that at some point, when the self-esteem started to be built back up with this foundation of humility, that God has built me in a specific way for a specific purpose, that it's okay to you should be encouraged to serve in a way, and to serve and make yourself useful and offer what you have, the giftings that you have, whether it be encouragement or hospitality or something creative or enthusiasm or wisdom or discernment, prayer, whatever it is. That's something that I think all of us have, we all have that fire about something in particular. I think that it's something God has uniquely placed in us to do. And when you're using that, it gets buried, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, but once you start to get sober and you start to uncover, kind of dig away all of the years of callousness and burden and pain and bitterness, and we start to rediscover, the process isn't just about taking those things away. The process is, the reason why the 12th step is serving, is that at that point we can start to offer the good things about ourselves to the community as a whole. And we need those things. So if you're listening to this and you're engaging in recovery and you're early in recovery, or you're thinking about engaging in recovery and you feel completely worthless and useless right now, I can promise you that if you work these steps, not only do you not have to feel the way that you feel right now, you don't have to live the way that you're living right now or that you used to live, but that there is better things on the other side, right? My recovery prayer the night that I got sober was, God, if I give this up, you have to give me something better. And it was more than I bargained for in the best way possible. Because what I realized, like you said, the paradoxal way, the paradox that is recovery is a selfish program, but that doesn't mean that it's about us being selfish.
Right.
It's about everything that I am in my life to other people, be it a father, be it a friend, being a husband, a son, a brother, a sponsor, whatever it is, podcast host now, apparently. All of those things flow out of me working on me.
Exactly.
And me getting me right.
Right.
And so it seems like an oxymoron. It seems like it shouldn't work that way, but that's exactly how it works. Yeah. Because I could not be the father I should have been, or that I can be now. I couldn't be the husband, couldn't be any of those things. And so the better thing that I prayed for, all of a sudden, those things were all around me the entire time, or they were going to be presented to me at some point. I didn't have to go searching for them. God made them readily apparent when I started working on me, and I could open my eyes to the very things that are around me. I've told this story, I think, on every podcast, and I'm going to keep telling it until somebody literally shows up at one of these recordings and tells me to shut up.
That ain't going to happen.
Yeah, so I'm going to just be ready. I'm going to keep. But I remember the first time that my eyes were open to those better things, and that was me driving on Landon Drive with my kids in the back seat, blaring some cheesy pop music, and we're dancing, and I'm acting a fool because I don't care. I'll do just about anything to make my kids laugh. And having that moment of, there's nothing wrong right now. I can enjoy this moment for exactly what it is, no matter what may come in the future, no matter what has happened in the past. I can enjoy this moment right now. And I feel that way. And since then, I continue to have moments and sprinkled in with all the struggle that I may experience, or, my own character defects that I continue to struggle with, I still have the ability to enjoy moments for what they are. Every single one of these podcasts, I get to enjoy the moment for what it is. My character, whatever, all the negative things around me, they'll be there. It's one
right.
until they're not. But there's always going to be something negative to face. But the promise of the program is that I don't have to face it the way that I used to.
Exactly.
And so with all of that, I feel like, man, I feel like it's a good ending point, unless there's something burning that you want to share. But
no, it's
I wanted to.
You said that word, enjoy. Key word is joy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not something we could say we experienced a whole lot of during active addiction.
Absolutely.
An active addiction is literally a shield that shields us from God, that does not allow him in. Even if we want him in, he's not going to come in until we surrender, and I read it in the Bible somewhere. I can't remember exactly where it is, where, there's sacrifice that needs to be made, and there's going to be a lot of pain attached to surrender, leading up to that surrender. And you basically got to go through hell before you get to heaven. For us, we got to go through a lot of hell. I went through a lot of hell. I mean, we would need 3 straight days of podcasting to cover it all. That probably wouldn't even cover it. But none of that matters today, because he has put us right where we're supposed to be, because as a direct result of the words Jesus spoke 2,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, that are no less true today than ever. and I embrace that. But that will, you know what I mean? Taking my will back, and we're all guilty of that. There's no question about it. But the cool thing is, every morning we wake up, it's a clean slate and we start over again, and as long as I keep that conscious contact with him every day, and when the days that I don't, I'm in for the next few days of just crap, that just miserable, whatever, you know what I mean? But when I embrace him, man, I have great days, but it's easy to not embrace him too, and I don't want to do that. I want to embrace him more and more. And had I not come to this church, to this fellowship, it would be still difficult for me. There's no question about it, because of all of the personalities in NA. There's a lot of personalities that butt heads, and it's but here it's just different here, because they're all believers here in Jesus Christ, the Savior of the universe. I mean, we wouldn't even be here, neither one of us. We would be 6 feet under if it wasn't for him. There's no question about that in my mind.
No doubt. Yep.
But yeah, as far as a good ending point, I want to continue working on myself. And I was asked to join the next step study.
Awesome.
Randy said, "You want to co-captain?" I'm like, what's that even mean? You want me there or not? And I didn't even hesitate. I'm like, of course, I know that this is this is part of my life now. Recovery is part of my life today, just like using was a part of my beginning of my life, that just wanted to destroy me and keep me blocked from the goodness of God, and once I experienced his goodness for the first time, like, I couldn't get enough, and he fills me up. And there's so many songs I hear, excuse me, Christian songs that I hear that are exactly that, fill my cup, Lord, let it overflow. And just, man, it's, I don't know. We could talk about this all night. I know we got to end at some point, but I'm just really extremely grateful that you invited me onto your podcast. And anyone who's listening, embrace this. If you're asked to do something in the church or be a part of service, say yes. Just, you got nothing to lose. Because a lot of times we think, oh, well, I'm not the right person for that, or I don't know what I'm doing. It doesn't matter, because God is the one in control that guides us to do what he wants us to do. And as soon as we say yes to him, he takes care of the rest. And I've experienced it many, many times. And I'm going to continue to say yes to him. And I'm just so grateful that I landed here at this little church where I know I'm supposed to be. And from what I've gathered, from what I've been told by a lot of members here at CR, this is one of the best CRs in this entire area, because of the embracing the Lord, because of the belief here, and because of the love one another part of this, and that's hard to do. It's hard. I mean, I have a hard time with it, especially driving, but I know I can come here and everything's okay, and I'm safe here. And, I'm around people that are like-minded, around people that want the same thing, just a better way to live and just to be a good person, the person he wants us to be. And without him, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine not having him in my life. I can't even imagine it today.
Well, man, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time. And like I said, every time somebody comes on, I'm like, I feel like saying, like, hey, I know there's something better that or something you'd rather be doing, but I appreciate that you chose to do this. So thank you so much for doing this. And also, just in general, I just wanted to say that I appreciate having you in my life, brother. You're just, like I said, that enthusiasm that you have, I should say, enunciate, that you have for recovery is so infectious, man. And it's just, I think it's definitely going to come across in this podcast. So thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who's listening. Remember, feel free, actually, please subscribe, rate, whatever, like, comment, and any kind of engagement with whatever platform you're listening on helps a ton. And like I said, the end goal is for people to hear stories like what Andy just shared. There's somebody that I genuinely believe needs to hear it. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.